It was 3 in the morning in Orpington when hundreds of armed officers surrounded a quiet traveller site. Helicopters circled above. Flashbangs cracked through the dark. Families woke to shouts, lights and confusion. Police called it one of Britain's biggest gun crime operations, but locals would soon question what really justified a raid of this scale. Because when the dust settled, the number of weapons found told a very different story. For months, the Metropolitan Police had been gathering intelligence. There were whispers about firearms changing hands, reports of criminal gangs using the site to move weapons across South London. To them, this was more than a local issue. It was a potential link in London's rising gun problem. And so, at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, they launched an operation that looked more like a counter-terror raid than a routine search. Over 30 police vehicles flooded Star Lane. Armed teams advanced from all sides, while drones buzzed overhead. Residents nearby woke to explosions, barking dogs, and the heavy beat of helicopter blades. Officers in riot gear poured through the site, shouting commands and forcing open doors. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Hundreds of officers, tactical units, dogs, and even counter-terror specialists working in unison. But what police expected to find, and what they actually uncovered, were two very different things. Inside the camp, caravans were cleared, one by one. Each family ordered outside. Each home searched in silence, except for the sounds of boots and radios. To some, it felt like a military occupation, not a police investigation. Drones filmed every move from above as officers swept through the site. After hours of searching, the confirmed haul was announced: 1 loaded shotgun, 17 air weapons, 1 antique musket, and a BB gun. There was ammunition, some of it homemade, plus a machete, CS gas, and around £112,000 in cash. Police also seized a number of dogs, quad bikes, and caravans they said were stolen. But critics were quick to point out that didn't sound like an arsenal. So why treat it like one? For the families living there, the raid felt like overkill, terrifying, humiliating, and completely unnecessary. Parents said their children woke screaming as flashbangs went off just meters away. Caravans were torn apart in the search. Doors smashed, possessions scattered. Many say they were treated like suspects, not citizens. One resident said, "We've lived here for years. We're used to police helicopters, but never like this. It was chaos." Another told reporters, "They said it was about guns, but there's more noise here than danger." Police defended the scale of the raid, calling it intelligence-led and essential. Commander Kyle Gordon, who oversaw the operation, said any weapon seized was one less that could harm someone on the streets. But locals asked a simple question: was the danger real or just perceived? The Metropolitan Police had been under pressure for months. Shootings across London had almost doubled compared to the previous year. Public confidence was slipping, and operations like this one were meant to send a clear message. The Met was taking action. But for the travellers living there, the message felt very different. The sight of hundreds of officers storming their homes felt less like protection and more like punishment. When fear meets politics, entire communities can become stage sets for reassurance. And that's what this looked like to many on the ground. A show of force designed as much for headlines as for justice. By sunrise, 7 people had been arrested, mostly for handling stolen goods, drugs, or burglary. 2 people were found in vulnerable conditions and were placed under the care of the Met's modern slavery team. Most of those arrested were later released under investigation. 1 man was cleared completely. Investigators said the site would continue to be searched for days, with every air weapon tested to see if it had been modified. Under UK law, most air rifles are legal. Only those using self-contained gas cartridges or of high power need a license. So while the headlines screamed "Major Gun Bust," the facts told a quieter story, one that blurred the line between caution and overreaction. Neighbours around the site offered mixed views. Some supported the operation, saying the camp had long been linked to trouble. Others felt the entire community was being judged by the actions of a few. One local said, "A lot of them are decent families." The raid scared the kids. It felt like overkill. Another described how helicopters and spotlights tore through the night. "It was like watching a film," he said, but the people inside weren't actors, they were families. Even officers admitted the operation was high risk and resource intensive. Hundreds of personnel, flashbangs, drones, specialist firearms teams, all to recover one shotgun and a collection of air guns. For some, it proved how far the police will go to prevent a tragedy. For others, it was proof of how far trust has fallen between law enforcement and marginalised groups. Commander Gordon said tackling violent crime remains the Met's top priority, and he's not wrong. London has seen a worrying rise in shootings, and police forces nationwide are under pressure to show results. But there's a growing debate about how far they're willing to go to prove a point. For some, this was a victory, proof the system works. For others, it was a stark reminder of how easily suspicion can turn into spectacle. A neighbour who watched the raid unfold said, "The area has long been under police attention. There were road closures and officers everywhere," he said. "They said it was about fly tipping, but I think it was surveillance." For the travellers, it wasn't surveillance. It was a full-scale invasion of their homes. Over the next 2 days, police continued to search every corner of the 22 pitch site. Families were told to stay outside as detectives combed through sheds, vehicles, and even fields behind the caravans. Some residents claimed the police presence doubled the next morning, with officers refusing to say how long they would remain. Drones stayed in the air. Helicopters hovered for hours. By the time the search ended, residents were left with broken windows, damaged property, and no clear explanation. For Commander Gordon, the goal was clear: to remove weapons before they could reach criminal gangs. He said, "This operation shows our commitment to tackling organised crime head-on." But to many watching, it also showed how easily organised crime can become a label applied to entire communities. Across Britain, traveller sites have long been caught in the middle of public suspicion and police pressure. Stereotypes and isolated incidents often shape perception more than facts. For officers, raids like this are justified by intelligence. For residents, they're reminders of how quickly an accusation can turn into a full-scale operation. The debate isn't just about Orpington. It's about the balance between safety and discrimination, between intelligence and evidence. When does a raid stop being precaution and start becoming intimidation? And how many communities will be left alienated by the tactics meant to protect them? One woman living near the site said the raids have become a routine part of life. "I've seen this happen before," she said. "They come in like it's a war zone, then disappear. But for the people living there, it never really ends." That sentiment captures what many feel: that the damage left behind isn't measured in weapons seized, but in trust destroyed. The Met insists that every officer, from local neighbourhood teams to specialist crime investigators, is focused on bringing down violence in London. And that's true. But how violence is defined, and who gets labelled as the source, remains the question. This case didn't uncover a weapons factory or a terror cell. It uncovered one shotgun, a few air guns, and a community now more suspicious of the police than ever before. For the Metropolitan Police, it's another box ticked in the fight against violent crime. For the travellers of Star Lane, it's another scar, a memory of flashing lights, fear, and unanswered questions. Because in the end, this wasn't just a search for guns. It was a test of trust between the police and the people they claim to protect. And trust, once shattered by spotlights and sirens, doesn't come back easily. In a city where every seized weapon counts as a victory, even a single shotgun can justify 100 uniforms, depending on who's telling the story. For one night in Orpington, that story was written in flashing blue lights and the sound of boots on gravel. A message sent loud and clear across London. But whether it was justice or just theatre is something only time and truth will decide.